Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Mutant Manifesto, episode 15.
Welcome.
It's me and Carson today. We'll be talking about... Oh, happy birthday, Josh.
Happy birthday, Josh.
We'll be talking about the... Basically, we wanted to talk about hiking, walks. We've talked about walking a bit as a meditative practice. But I'm also interested in... We are also interested in the question of nature. What is nature, Is it an essential thing that you can point at or not? And as part of this thinking, we read The National Park to Come. I listened to a podcast that had...
Margret Grebowicz. Yeah, she's a philosopher. And she's kind of in the lineage of Donna Haraway, or at least she does a lot of stuff with Donna Haraway's work. And I feel like on this podcast it was interesting that it came about that we read this book, because I had read that one on the Cyborg Manifesto and Donna Haraway by her and another person, and then I read that book on porn also by her, and then she's cool. She's got some good stuff.
Yeah, her name's come up a couple times or on this podcast for you in relation to other topics, so yeah. It was cool to be like, oh, I guess that person was on this podcast that was meaningful to me that just ended recently, that is called White Night Skies by Sean Lally. It's like an architecture podcast, but it's really about all sorts of things. But I listened to that episode a while ago and really enjoyed the way that she meditated on, because she wrote a book, The National Park to Come, questioning assumptions about who these national parks are for when they say they're supposed to be the park where everyone can go to enjoy nature. Who they're for really, in the context of exclusions and eradications, to construct and maintain them. And then also questions about the essential, the impossible position of trying to point your finger and say that this is nature and this is not nature. This is home, in a deep sense, like the home of humanity, the home of life, and this is not. And how kind of ironic it is to have those borders be so literally patrolled and militarized in sort of a cloaked way in the national park. I think that as far as I'm concerned, some main themes that I'm interested in unpacking here are what I get from hiking, because hiking has been such a grounding and amazing routine to have in my life for the past 6 years, I'd say. It's been really keeping me sane, which is another thing that people say about going to national parks, going to nature. I've been thinking a lot about, going on hikes does a lot for me, but I always come up against these questions of what is it that I'm getting from the hikes? Is it just stretching my legs? Why is it so hard to get away from it all? Which is another idiom that comes up in these contexts all the time. Why do I want? Because what's my real desire there when I'm going for those hikes? And then alongside with those, what is the nature of wildness and danger in these contexts, and how does that relate to my desires?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some kind of key interests you have, Carson, coming into this discussion?
Well, I think I'm also, I've been hiking for a while and grew up in a park and have a pretty intense, relationship to conservation, not as someone working in conservation, but as someone who really benefited from it. And the weirdness around that, and tourism, I guess, would be another huge part of that. And Margaret Grebowicz talks a lot about photography, and I feel like we keep bringing up photography, or maybe in the like through social media and Instagram and stuff, and as a specific, technology and phenomenon of the mostly 20th century. I'm interested to get into that a bit, and the relationship with all this to romanticism, and maybe romanticism's relationship to, I don't know, what we could, like the dangerous type of romanticism, maybe, of like eco-fascism, and kind of the real, like, original, authentic nature and stuff like that. Yeah, and I guess also a big question then would be like where to go from here, and that's where also this book was great, and the conclusion and stuff about what is the future of like a national park, or what do national parks need to adapt to or reconsider ideologically, in order to not basically perpetuate these same romantic, like, well, I guess we'll get into it, but those are the big questions, for me. Yeah, I guess also the health one as well, like a well-being of hiking and what it does for you and why do you do it. And I prepared today by going on a really pretty grueling hike, actually, for the first time in a long time, and was thinking about that. And yeah, I mean, I don't even know. It was pretty brutal, and like physically, and I kind of was like, am I entering a new part of my life, I guess, a new era of like not feeling like I need to do this and just being satisfied with like walking around town. um yeah, but I love paths. I've always loved a good path. um yeah.
So yeah, like in my current life, in Minnesota, I live right next to a trail, Theodore Wirth Park, which is it starts out so, and I go on this walk quite often right now, like several times a week, and it starts out as just a long strip of like there's a long paved road with lampposts and mowed lawns and like very evenly planted trees, and it's all just completely flat and straight for a while, and then eventually it branches off into a couple different parks. Like there's actually quite a few. It's a quite extensive park system. Minnesota has a very extensive, one of the highest rated in the country park system in the city. But this one, there are ways that it twists into natural wooded areas, and they are quite beautiful. And I've had quite a good time getting to know these. There's three different kind of woodland areas that are within the urban environment that you can get to from this original straight, very lawn based path. But they're all, you can hear cars from all of them, and there's lots of like people riding bicycles that kind of annoy me. Because you always have to be aware of them, and you're never truly alone. And it can be kind of spooky going at night, because that's when you can be more alone. But the more you're alone, the more you're afraid that there might be someone else there, because there very well might be.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, when I was living in LA, I was really into hiking as well, but I would actually go to Will Rogers, Solstice Canyon. I would like go on like Duke Mejan, which is like a deep cut. But these are all places where you drive to. It's like a 50-minute drive or whatever, like 30 to 50 minutes. And if you go hiking there long enough, I'd go there for like 4 hours plus. And if you go long enough, it's very strenuous at first, but you get used to it and you keep going further and further every time. Then you'll actually get to places where there's no one around. For like a long amount of time. And that's a really experience that I really love having. But it's not really attainable in Minnesota. I even went to the Boundary Waters for my birthday to like on like a solo expedition, and it was so capitalism. It was so there was really nothing. There was not much unperturbed, so to speak, wilderness at all. And on top of that, when I finally did say like, okay, I'm gonna go hiking on this trail here, the mosquitoes were so bad, like that it made it basically impossible to go more than like an hour. Even though I had, all the bug spray and stuff, wearing long sleeves, like they were truly swarming every inch that they could. So that's another element where it's like, here I was out in this nature, but the nature has a like very dense, like Minnesota's where the mosquitoes are only increasing in number because of climate change. Yeah, it's like really, really bad there. The mosquitoes. So it's another element of like nature is a mosquito, and it's one of those moments where you're like the annoyances that you run away from to go hiking. There are also annoyances there too. It's not just humanity and urban architecture and like the sounds of the urban world that are annoying. There's also annoying things everywhere you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess this is a long. It's a long way of also relating to the. Like I've been enjoying my urban hikes quite a bit. I've always had and paths are really important to me. I've always had since I was a child, like walking around in circles in my yard. I've always needed that like walking to like, and it really does just. It clears your mind. It accelerates certain thoughts. Yeah. And it also calms. It helps you sort stuff out.
Yeah. I'm thinking about when I was younger that I'm just remembering like running away, like when I was upset or something happened, and like hiding in the woods around where our house was. And yeah, it's funny to think like that maybe at a certain time in your life that feels like good and necessary. And then maybe I think like when I was dealing with illness, like that sort of feeling of being away from everybody else was terrifying, because I was always like, I'm gonna like pass out, like I'm not, like nobody's gonna find me, like I don't know. So just I do like this thinking about like the people being there and whether that's comforting or not, or whether I don't know, nature, trees, animals, water, streams, lakes and stuff, like whether that presence, like what it does for you. And yeah, maybe how to strike like a good balance. Or some people just don't seem to care, Some people just like live their whole life in like somewhere like densely populated, and I don't know, it's fine, like also that there are ecologies of their own everywhere. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to try and think about what maybe is like a like a general objective, like good or bad thing in this case. Like, I don't know if we'll come up with something, but something that I was thinking about while hiking was just like, yeah, like is this good that this exists still, and like, or like what problems does it pose? I suppose, yeah, like what problems does it pose for I don't know, like the future of the world and life. But
well, one of the questions that always comes up for me is like the path. Like, is it good that there's this trail?
Yeah,
like literally,
right.
Because that's really the question for me. Is like, if you're going to a national park, 90% of the time you're going on a designated trail, and you're very, very highly encouraged to do so. And oftentimes they use phrasing related to conservation to encourage people to stay on the trails. In fact, if you go to Solstice Canyon in LA, which is like a site of like of ruins, and there's, this is the common thing that you see in national parks and stuff of the like. You'll be walking along hiking, and there will be like in the ground little signs that say like "smile, you're on camera." Like they will point out the fact that you're being surveilled in these wilderness areas.
Yeah.
Like, so like don't go climbing on the ruins or whatever, Yeah. But and there's this kind of patriotic call to personal accountability in these spaces as well. Pack in, pack out, leave it better than you found it, leave no trace, all these different things that are sort of indoctrinating us that are supposedly related to conservation, But then it's also like, but the question really becomes though, you're going on these trails and it's like, you're thankful that these, like sometimes they're paved even for quite a while. And it's like, that could be very good for accessibility. And I think that's a public health good. But, so it really does kind of come down to the question of though, like this is more of a park, of a attraction, of a garden than it is a wilderness area, like so to speak.
Right, the mediation,
You know what I mean?
like the whether something has been touched, tainted, or whatever, and how, to what extent does that, and this is where the romantic idea comes in, and also like we'll have to talk about like the colonial, like imperial romanticism of an untouched world, but how that's just like literally false, like that didn't exist, and this whole conundrum that in the national park to come of making it seem like the wilderness is what is wilderness, is untouched, is uninhabited, is not cultivated, not stewarded, like that's where you really get into this. What's up?
Okay, but like national parks would say, okay, so what is the ideology of a national park in America? Most national parks that you see. I think that the ideology is usually that nature is simply a beautiful array of a biodiverse, trees, critters, etc., that have always been a certain way, and it's actually our role as the state and as the patriotic citizen to enter into it and be respectful of it, but not to intrude into it. So like your Grebowicz mentions she has this phrasing a lot of standing on the edge of nature, because that's like as far as you're allowed to go in the national park. They have like the path is making an edge through the wilderness, and you're not you're not supposed to trespass beyond that. But so the national park ideology is that it is eternally a certain way. Nature is. It's our role to steward it as the nation, as individuals, and also, it is unpeopled. Ironically, there's always people there as rangers or as visitors, but they're not supposed to be residents. The main thing is they're not supposed to
you're not supposed
what
to
makes
actually
it nature
live
is
there.
that people aren't living there.
Right.
But that's the part that is anti-indigenous or whatever. It's like that's the part that is xenophobic.
Yeah, like it does kind of function on a logic of racism, is what she gets at towards the end. She's bringing up a lot of like Baudrillard quotes at the end about like America as like a utopia like achieved in that I gotta find the quote quick, but about like basically creating like a transcendental, like ahistorical, apolitical, naturalized, like yeah, collective of. Hold on, let me just find a quote. Yeah, like a place that like politics disappears, but like so like you go to a national park and it's like apolitical. You know, it's beautiful nature, it's spectacular, like, but the ways in which that has been politically constructed, and how that she gets into this idea that like people go there basically as witnesses that democracy is natural and was what preceded whatever world we live in now, where we're trying to get back to an original, like democratic, free world, and that, but ironically, that it has to then be like unpeopled, you know, uninhabited. So it's this weird like paradox that's it's like an impossibility, but maybe what the focus maybe what we should focus on and what she focuses on is like, well, what does it do for us, I suppose, like, and how could it be adapted, like the national park system or parks in general, how could they be bettered, for everybody, like truly, instead of this like, you know, American history type of, you know, freedom for all, but you know, like while having very glaring like abuses of people. So yeah.
On page 43, she writes, "Hospitality is a complex issue within the national park idea. In order to become the kind of place in which I can receive guests, the home must be rightfully mine, instituted as mine, pronounced as my own. It is only in my house that I can act as a host to another. Thus, as Derrida shows, an original violence is built into the very possibility of hospitality." So, like, if you want to, so the idea of hospitality, the national parks are, you're a guest there, you're visiting there. There is an irony to the concept of hospitality that Derrida talks about, and Grebowitz's quote is drawing from, that is instituted by the project. It's the state saying, it's America saying that, like, you are all visitors to our property, you know? And that's kind of it's kind of hidden by the facade of this appeal to the like wonders of nature and the essential nature of nature. And like the it's elided, it's similar to the way that ideology about nativeness is also mobilized in a lot of different national settings, where there's an appeal to, and also in the, like, I'm thinking about like Boy Scouts and stuff too, like summer camps and things like that. They are always they oftentimes are appropriating native vibes and like words, quote unquote, like that are supposedly attributed to some chief or another.
Yeah.
And they are also, you know, there's this noble savage idea that I think is also similar to the way that nature is seen. It's seen as something, and also it's seen as something that we need to preserve, not touch, but that is like, it must be other than us, which is ironic, you know? It's ironic that, like, okay, this thing can't be like, if I don't know, it's like if people are there, then it can't be itself, you know? But it's so ironic that they would say that, because like that's kind of how it's always been. Like, where do you think people started out? You know, that like people. I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of feel like I'm losing some traction there, actually, because all these things have so many different. I guess this is kind of the trap of deconstruction, because like
Right.
all these different things have so many different meanings at this point. It's hard to locate
Right.
and hold on to them. But
Yeah. Just maybe as an aside to what you were just saying, that I read a book a while ago called Playing Indian. That's by Philip J. Deloria.
oh yeah, I was literally thinking about that book as well for this discussion.
I read that a while ago, and it was really because where I grew up, I grew up in like a touristy area that's in a state park in the Adirondacks. And like a huge part of that, of the tourist experience or the experience that you are selling to people, is not just that there are woods here, but it's also that there is the frontier is still alive and well. The American frontier on an internal level of like, with the Adirondacks as an example, was, a very difficult place to settle and wasn't settled by Europeans, like, creating towns and everything. There was like the trapper industry and the logging industry in the like 17th, 18th century, but really wasn't settled until like the late 1800s, until like a railroad was built from New York City up, and then it became a destination, a tourist destination for people from Manhattan to take the train up. And then, yeah, it's really crazy to like grow up in that and then see how much like frontier shit is there. Like, even though it's not geographically like accurate or applicable or historically whatever, that it's all like reimagined as the American West, even though it's in northern New York. And what I mean by that is you have like, there used to be a huge amusement park that was called Frontier Town. There is a like tourist trap place called the Wild West. That's basically just exactly what you would think it is. It's kind of like this cross between like it's not even a museum. It's like kind of like an amusement park, but it's kind of this like hokey like thing. But yeah, and that like honestly, there's so many other things like selling like this still alive like like Indian populated frontier area, and I don't think that it's just like native people, like I think also there's this making of this image of like a place still populated by bald eagles, bears, moose, and you have all these figures that are on everything that we know from any sort of woodsy mountain town. It's like, if you ever get a shirt or a postcard or signs for everything, it's just like totally inundated with these figures and the names of like tribes, the names of animals and stuff. But like none of these are there anymore. Like, or if they are, like they're very like, completely depleted populations or relocated populations of people and animals, to the point where it's like, what is this exactly? Like it's just about the vibe, like this this bygone like nostalgic vibe. Actually, there was a interesting part at the end, Jackie, maybe you know what I'm talking about, where she's talking about someone came up with this guy named Glenn Albrecht. I can't remember who he is or what he does, but came up with this idea of solastalgia, like a form of pining for a lost environment, a version of homesickness that does not require actually leaving home, but instead the experience of home as already gone. It's like a new type of sadness or mood disorder, unprecedented in human history. and I guess maybe other people would just call this like some sort of malaise or like ennui, or I don't know, but like in an American context, it's really bizarre. Maybe it just specifically has to do with like this loss of some sort of indigeneity of like, or some sort of maybe that's not the right word, but like, settlers just feeling like lost later.
Yeah. The fantasy of being on the frontier, I've been thinking about how a Mutant Manifesto is intimately related to America, actually, because America is kind of like America as a like contemporary America, the nation America is founded on kind of the principle that it's your right as a white man to be able to go and like mutate the rest of the world, essentially, in whatever image you want to make it into. The idea is that you're going out into nature, into like ripe nature, and you're like generating whatever you want to generate with it, whether it's a Protestant sort of appeal to hard work and a certain conservative form of the family, or it's a radically different, like it's a cult or something, or it's a national park, or it's a like chemical research plant, or it's a like the American part of the American dream, I think, that is kind of elusively described in the media that it's generated is the dream to generate change, to it's the frontier. It's like, okay, we're gonna like we're gonna change the world, and that's also the legacy of America. It's like it's always been changing the whole time, but like that creates that instability means that you go back to your hometown 10 years later and it's different, and like it's developed, it's developed into something different.
Yeah.
It's constantly changing, and oftentimes in ways that you want to fight against. I wanted to quote also, like, in relation to the Timbisha tribe that it has like a sanctioned tribal area like adjacent to Death Valley, and there's been an ongoing contentious question about whether and how they can occupy an area of Death Valley, which is supposed to be theirs, that Grebowicz talks about, that I wanted to quote really quickly. Page 14, quote, "The mountainous area called Wild Rose, the tribe's camp during the sweltering summers, is no longer available to them as a place to live. As with the rest of the park, however, the Wild Rose area is open for hiking and backcountry camping all year round, in keeping with the Wilderness Act of 1964, which defines wilderness as, quote, an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man finds himself as a visitor who does not remain."
Yeah.
So that's literally written into like law, like national law, the a definition of wilderness as something that doesn't have man in it. I think that's really interesting, especially considering the idea, to quote another section, this is page 62, quote, "The more it may be claimed that wilderness grounds true human experience, the more wild spaces require protection from potential threats. According to Baudrillard, America is the only remaining primitive society. Primitive because rather than understanding or imagining itself in terms of culture and civilization, this society imagines itself in terms of nature in reserve." Unquote. "Only Puritans could have invented and developed its ecological and biological morality based on preservation and therefore discrimination, which is profoundly racial in nature." Unquote. So this idea, again, of like this like Father America that is sanctioning a certain area as protected, like this area needs protection, and part of protection means exclusion and stasis, But it's ironic because in doing that, you also, you're also, you're saying that only you get to decide what future that place has. And what the Timbisha tribe is trying to do with the Wild Rose area is claim sovereignty. Because, like, being native is not being static. Being native is being native. So, like, that includes change as well. But the thing is, like, the struggle there is not to be like, no, we want it to go back to the original thing. It's saying, like, we want to have a future here, We want to be able to...
Yeah, nice.
And America's saying, like, no, the future of this place is that we'll continue to, like, have it be...
It'll be the same frozen...
Or reserve of nature.
Yeah,
This idea of, like, it's our treasure trove. It's it's a national treasure.
Yeah.
And it can't be touched.
Right, but it's this, like, I guess maybe then we could talk about this split of, like, a reserve in, like, the effective, like, maybe psychological sense of, like, knowing that it's there, and that, like, I think that it relates really to, like, this apocalyptic thing of, like, the world is ending or has ended, and we need to preserve whatever, like, parts of it are healthy enough to basically balance out emissions and can act as like a carbon reserve. But, like, I guess I already actually mixed the two right there. I was going to try and split, like, the effective from, like, the ecological, but I guess there isn't really maybe there isn't that much of a split. But knowing that, like, like, there's a place to retreat to if like, this all fails, that there is still a world out there that it was how it, quote, was before, even though that is not actually true, we're seeing, So it's like, it's maybe more of what this points to about the American imagination, like an American white imagination about what the world is, and what maybe, like, what land and your relationship to land is. And yeah, I lost what I was trying to say, but
well, so yeah, it's like, okay, so the like, there's the conservationist ideology behind preserving spaces is to like, well, it's literally our lungs, like our oxygen. We get oxygen from these trees, and, like, we need to have these natural spaces in order to generate that, to offset the carbon emissions we make with the rest of our enterprise. And B, the idea that, like, it's like there's an apocalyptic imagination at the center of this ideology as well. And it's like, okay, at some point, this thing that we live our daily lives in is going to spin out, and then we need something else to, like, go to.
Yeah.
And so just having it there is like a kind of you're saying, like, a kind of compulsion.
Like a heaven.
Kind of, like,
kind of like a heaven of this isn't the real world, or this isn't the eternal world, that there is something beyond this. There's something, that, the fall from this. The fall from the original. I mean, it does map out pretty well of, like, a Garden of Eden, and then a fall. Maybe the fall being, like, modernity or something, or maybe some, like, people would. I know some people would be like, the fall was, like, the advent of agriculture or something. And then everything afterwards was, some like, inauthentic, like, experiment that is doomed to fail, and then there will be a return to this Eden type world. Yeah.
Derrida talks about this too, and Grebowicz once again borrows from Derrida. Page 65. Quote, "The impossible is the only thing that can arrive. As long as something is possible, it is in a sense already here, now, with us. The impossible, what Derrida calls the arrivant, is the very possibility of the future as something distinct from the present. The impossible erupts, not as a spectacular eruption on the horizon, but as an interruption of horizontality itself." So, basically, the impossible, the rupture, the apocalypse, is there as an imaginative thing that interacts with the present, essentially.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's also like the fact that it's interacting with the present, it doesn't mean that it has to have a timeline in which this specific apocalypse happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, okay, if there's all these different possibilities of apocalypse, if they're possible, I don't know. It's like they are, they are happening in the future.
Right.
But in the present, what matters is our relation to them in thought, essentially. You know?
Right.
And so, I think that relates to the way that we try to kind of compulsively hold on to things that ground us, like images that ground us, and that's where the photography comes in. That's where the imagination and the knowledge, quote unquote, that nature is still there, is our way of saying like, oh, it's okay, like, I'm okay. It's like calling your mom when you're really freaked out. Yeah, the thing that you're afraid of happening, I don't know. I feel like it kind of almost helps to think of it as more imminent, as like, yes, it is happening.
Right, exactly. But Timothy Morton was also quoted in this saying, "The end of the world has already happened. We sprayed the DDT, we exploded the nuclear bombs, we changed the climate. This is what it looks like after the end of the world." So it's like, that it maybe already did happen, is happening, and also that, like we talked about on another episode, with Amir and Jasmine and Josh, was like that it's not one event, It's like maybe it's this slow, like kind of mundane, painful, boring, like 200-year process, 300-year process. Like I don't know, in that we like, and again, like what you just said of like what really matters more is how we think about it, and that's, I guess, the task of I don't know if you call it like maybe eco-criticism or environmental like criticism, but it's what we're trying to think through. And because all of this does have a different edge than it did 60 years ago. So it has a certain gravity now that we grew up with, that we have to contend with, that different generations, even our parents' generations, like didn't really have. So, yeah.
So there's an interesting way that the conservationist ideology interacts with this idea of futurity and apocalypse. I think that the idea is that the idea of leave no trace, the idea of standing on the edge of wilderness, the fantasy that's instilled by getting a nature photograph where there's no humans and it's all trees, and like maybe there's a bear or some fish or something, and this idea from the Romantic period of literature of the invisible eyeball, that's the ideal. You go out into nature and you become an invisible eyeball, just perceiving the world. And that is the transcendentalism of nature, of being in nature, is that you disappear. Combined with the idea that man is inherently going to corrupt and destroy nature. The only outcome of that, essentially, that is it's a suicidal ideology. It says that, like, and it makes sense coming from a subjectivity that actually relies on oftentimes destructive, like oil and CO2 emissions beyond
Yeah.
imagination.
Yeah,
But-
right.
But it is also it's one of those things where it's like I'm willing to sacrifice you in order to reduce carbon emissions. That's kind of the ideology. Like I'm like humanity, including you, is bad for the world.
Yeah.
So I'm willing, as America, to sacrifice you.
Right, right.
But like the real lie is that like technology, progress, humanity is inherently counter, like change, like radical change, ecological change. Like these things are opposed to nature. That is not true. Like nature is subjective. It really is. And I think getting out of that binary is actually really essential for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, it's not essentially true that humanity is bad for nature. Like, and it's not essentially true that technology or anything is bad for nature. There's all sorts of possibilities there. And having an open mind when it comes to what the future can be, I think actually does open up the future. Terence McKenna had this theory of like exponentially increasing novelty. That's the time that we're in is a time of increasing novelty. It's by exponentially increasing factors, we're getting more and more novelty every year, minute, second. But he also has this conviction that, quote, the world ends in green, unquote. Don't really know exactly what he means by that, but he was really believed in the like consciousness of plants and stuff. And I would like to think that is true with or without us. But it can be with us, And so like being with the green, like you are there.
Yeah,
you are taking the photo. You are driving your vehicle in nature.
And
you are
like the green is also that you're in a parking lot. And then you're trying to find the frame of the photo where there are no RVs.
Yeah.
Like that is also the same,
Yeah, and it's you on the computer. It's you, it's I don't know. Like, but I mean, yeah, this is kind of more like transitioning to I wanted to talk more about like the feelings that we get personally in nature and comparing and contrasting those and stuff. Does that sound good? Is there anything else?
No, I actually
that subject. I feel like there was more on the topic that you might have wanted to.
Oh, I think maybe just to wrap it up, and I'll be really concise. That I think what we were trying to get at is this American. I'm not sure what sort of sect of Christian like thinking this even is, but like the relationship between like heaven and paradise and nature and conservation for like those purposes. But I do think it's interesting and good to know like that has a historical like time and place that thing developed, like that thinking developed alongside, like not against, but alongside like colonialism and the creation of the US that was also like founded on like a depeopling of the land and also a repeopling of the land with enslaved people as well. Like there's a lot of things we could draw from in that. Then maybe that's a tangent because I was going to talk about like plantation tourism also as like a really weird thing that I think like also goes into conservation, conservation not just of like the plant and animal world, but conservation of like historical things that like somehow need to be frozen in time as like a museum photography spectacle to like revisit. And that sort of stuff is really interesting, memorializing and but like what is yeah, I don't want to go into the tangent, but then maybe later. But then also this like this anti-suicidal strain of like, okay, if people are bad for the ecology, of a place, if people as they are right now are bad for the ecology of a place, then it like actually here I'll just read it. She has a quote in here that was like, I don't know the page number, but if nature dies because we enter it, then the only way to save nature is to kill ourselves. That's a quote from somebody else. She's like, oh, it might sound absurd, but in fact, it's entirely logically sound. But what makes the fantasy of unpeopled wilderness problematic is not its unsoundness, but the role it plays in the naturalization of democracy. The wilderness idea functions actively to depoliticize not only nature, but politics, which is a whole other thing that I thought was really interesting about this book. But I think that maybe what I was drawing from this was like that, yeah, that's not actually factually true, but maybe we should dig a little deeper into that, like, misanthropic, like, oh, like, if only we, and I've heard this a ton, like, it's, like, people are the problem, like, we are, we are the disease, whatever, and that sucks to think about, it sucks to feel like that's true. And I think people hope that it isn't true, but maybe just a lot of times, I don't know, like, don't have much of a better way of, like, thinking themselves out of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe a way to think yourself out of it or something, or maybe something that can help is, like, wait, go for it.
Is becoming attuned to the... Okay, so yeah, I mean, there is kind of this again, like, I keep teasing this, like, animist discussion that I want to have, but I wanted to say that, like, humans are not essential either. That's the main thing that I'm saying.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, nice.
And it's also a studied and known, move of propaganda by the neoliberal state. And the fascism of America. Part of it is the psy-op of saying that it's each of your individual faults, like, and to get us to blame ourselves and hate ourselves, and and what does that do? It obscures the role of the state. Like, it's literally these things, like, they're not our choice to, like, have a huge oil lobbies. It's not our choice to have, like, factory farmed food as the only source of calories. It's not our choice to have, these things are manufactured for us, and they are presented as choices, and then you're told to, if you're not recycling, then you're contributing to climate change.
Yeah.
So, like, it's a psy-op that's really, really insidious, that people repeatedly are able to frame things in terms of being the fault of the individual citizen, when, like, that citizen is just surviving in the system to begin with, But of course, so, like, that is, like, what I would, that is the leftist counter to the claim that it is the suicidal ideation that is instilled upon us, saying that each of us are to blame for the woes of the world, like, oh man, I'm such a bad person because I live in this country, or that I, like, that all these bad things are happening, but, like, you're not causing them. You are only instrumentally causing them. You're causing them because your choices are reduced to either causing them or not existing. So yeah. So that's why, we need a collective, we got to figure out ways to, I don't know. I think what to do once you understand that is, like, up to, it's hard to say, but again, that's why I have the conviction that studying leftist politics might have something there, even though you have to also keep an eye on the fact that, like, we're in a constantly changing situation. So, like, this current moment, we can't just take the same page of a book from a previous movement and copy paste it. But I do think that studying collective action could have a lot of I don't know. I don't even know. I mean, I don't know what
Yeah,
to
yeah.
diagnose about that, but I'm just saying that I feel like that is like a big psyop, you know,
For sure. Yeah. That. Yep.
like blaming the
It's
self
because
for
you have an
blaming your.
iPhone. It's because you use straws. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because you drive and you don't bike to work. Whatever. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And I was
Like.
just trying to tease out this like maybe this American conservative strain that is like this. I don't know. Like this kind of like hope that there is a world, a paradise beyond this one that is eternal and everything, but also like like that could be like that the faith in that could be very like helpful and comforting.
I see,
But at
I
the
see.
same time, I have family and I know people that also use the same sort of thinking in order to excuse the like destruction of this one, of like, oh, that this isn't the real world, or this isn't the eternal whatever, that this is just some bastardization of that. And like so it doesn't it like leads to some ambivalence. And I think that it goes back to what you're saying about like basically being able to do what you want to make nature in whatever shape that like you have the the liberty, the right to destroy it, but also I'm just trying to point out some things maybe that are like uniquely like maybe like American that aren't really like this. But it's weird because this the whole concept that I think is trying to be like brought about in Baudrillard, and then in what she's drawing from Baudrillard is like America as like transcendental, like transcendentalism, that it transcends all of this, and that it's like this, I don't know, like it's like hard to even talk about. But yeah, I had another point, but I lost it.
Right. Well, so the idea that, if you stay in line and like do everything according to the principles set out by the Constitution or the the Ten Commandments, then basically you will get to the perfect heaven.
Right. Well, then there's also that. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about that, about the morality thing, about like oh, what does being a good person do, basically. I'm also like in a class right now where we're talking a lot about this, specifically like reading like a Charles Dickens book, and like there's so much about like these like angelic children that are like just born good, and are eternally good. You are like this good spirit or something. You're an angel, but like that then because of that goodness, you are supposed to also expect or receive like better treatment. You're supposed to be selected maybe during a rapture or something to be, lifted away, that you won't like be one of the people that burns in this like, or drowns in like the worldwide flood or something, that like. And you could see very easily how this relates to like biopolitics, and how it relates to basically just keeping you living a certain way and accepting certain conditions.
Yeah. I think that work is a huge, again, that's another like fusion of the Protestant and the like atheist, the Protestant and the like science progress narrative,
it's like
of
rationalist.
America. Yeah. And the like frontier of like this apex between, or this nexus between God and atheism. That is kind of it's a schizophrenic fusion that has like generated a lot of this stuff. But between God and atheism, because I think it's that suicidal perseveration. It's like this world sucks, but I'm gonna get to a different one. But the work, I think that people like, it's almost out of fashion potentially. I don't know, but yeah, the American exceptionalism is undergirded by, being part of this national ethos of one sort or another. One way we see it manifested is like, if you work hard enough, just like basically, if you ingest the right ideology and grind hard enough, or just stay in your lane enough, and if you are, a good neighbor and you stay within the lines of morality, then you will be rewarded after that. It's not in the
Yeah.
And like hard work is its own reward and stuff too, but I think that the idea is that like these like ethical frameworks do kind of affect a sort of sedimentation of the national projects. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and it's oftentimes, so it's like America is also, so okay, so like if you work hard enough, then you sacrifice your life in labor.
Yeah, you sacrifice your time.
A house and property and a pension.
Right. And also, it's for the future. It's for the future generations. It's for your children. It's for your children's children.
Yeah.
It's for your legacy, your property, legacy.
It's also for your ability to be taken care of.
Yeah,
in your
true.
old age.
Right, it's an investment.
Retire. Yeah, which is like a version of like.
Yeah, like an investment in yourself, like later.
Yeah. And then America in general is saying that like. Its ideology is also like, I don't know, it's kind of like hoarding the resources of the world, and for a long time it's been nominally justified by this idea that America is also protecting the world and holding it into a world order. Of course, all these things are rife with insane violence and like machinations to dismantle whatever competition there was from other systems, but it was trying to justify its own specialness by saying that it is also protecting the rest of the world by keeping it in a stasis. So it's like, and again, this kind of irony of this like stasis that you're supposed to be keeping the world in while you mutate it beyond recognition.
Yeah.
It's and in such a horrible way.
Right.
But it's interesting that it's in the like, okay, so we have like a world order held in place by America's military, which of course has become increasingly unstable, in many cases due to these very things. I mean, economically too, like, you can read the shock doctrine or whatever else about like the way that we like violently inculcate free market capitalism. You completely dismantle all the public infrastructure of like any country you can get your hands on, which creates incredible instability and incredibly high suicide rates when the market crashes. You see all those things carried out in the name of appealing to the free market as a natural force, as a part of nature, as a force of nature, So I think that there is a core, paradoxical, again, fusion between this idea of the way things essentially are, the way things naturally are, and what you have to do to like keep that the case.
Right.
Like you have to go and fuck shit up in order to make things how they naturally should be. And
yeah.
But you have to keep doing that, otherwise it won't be that way. So if you stop doing something, then how is it naturally that way if you have to be working your whole life and fucking things up all the time in order to keep it that way,
Yeah.
But it is kind of one of those paradoxes. And I feel like in your daily life too, it's like, does that...
No, yeah.
Are you with me there? Am I making sense?
I'm thinking about a bunch of different things all at the same time, and I like that you're always trying to like destabilize some of these things that we're thinking of as like, or not maybe that we are thinking of, but that have been like purported to be natural static categories, but in something that maybe I'm trying to offer is like another way to do that with some surety or something is through like some sort of historical lens of like thinking about the 19th century or something as this amalgamation of like utilitarian, like rationalist, like economics, and also Darwin and like the theory of evolution, and then also like the birth of all these fields of like biostatistics and populations, like science, basically, population management, and then you have so it's like you have this crazy like storm in the 19th century in Europe, but in the US, I guess, as well. But that, like, a lot of this shit still is kind of what people think about as real. Like, but it has a historical, like, origin.
Right. It's
and
actually
we can
new.
learn it, you know, we can think about it, and we can, like, learn about, like, utilitarians and, like, what, like, how that created, like, I don't know, like these forces. And like maybe something that's nice also is like then you can read Marx, and like he just completely like goes against all these things, like, and it's also historical. It like has a historical moment, and it doesn't need to necessarily be like we need to recreate this, like, you know, like proletariat, like revolution, that like in a world that's been so completely like disfigured, like from that we like we can't even think about, or we can think about it, but like, you know, it's not in the same, we maybe can't think about it through the same like the same lens, you know. Then, and I like this thing about work too, thinking about work and time, because like maybe the point being made is that America is being made as some reserve, not just for the ecological, you know, not just for the capture of carbon or something as an investment for the future, but it's a reserve for like this spectacle of like of this romantic spectacle, and the role that like film, TV, and photography have had in that, in making that. So it's not just, oh, that the world is not static, that human is not static, but it's also in relationship to these things. It's being constituted by things like photography, like how we're even thinking about all of this is being influenced by something like photography. And thinking about work and like this historical like American Protestant ethic, something or other, that now since since the 70s has been just like obliterated by outsourcing all the actual or most of the work to other places, or the work that is being done here is being done by people that are like, you know, migrant workers, or like. So it's like, what is this really for? It's kind of like this whole like tourist spectacle now. And I think that actually tracks. Like, you talk to other people from different parts of the world, like, that like think about the US and like, I want to go. And it's like, well, why do you want to go? And they say Disneyland or New York City. Like, and I'm not even exaggerating. Like, that happens a lot. Like, people will respond by saying like, oh yeah, I went to the US once. Where did you go? Oh, Florida, and I went to Disneyland or something. And it's like, I mean, like, it's hard to like parse that out and not kind of like roll your eyes or something. You know what I mean? As like, oh, like, really? Like, but then again, like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that is what this is kind of turning into, you know, like this. Country that's now supposed to be in the landscape is being drawn into this as this spectacle of like,
I see.
Yeah, you know, like
so like America as like a one big simulacra is kind of a Baudrillardian kind of approach.
Right,
it's a big spectral society that like the bargain and the draw is to basically transcend reality. You know, it's to be like to be in an artist's Mickey Mouse world as opposed to the real world. And then even nature is sold in the same capacity because it's a simulated nature. Even when you go to a park, it's a simulated nature. You don't have to worry about this or that.
But when you actually go, though, that's the thing. Like, when you actually do go, like, I have also, like, been, like, disheartened of, like, wow, this actually sucks. Like, this is, like, I'm stuck in traffic. Like, there's tons of people around. Everyone has their phones and cameras out the whole time. Like, it's not what you thought it was going to be. And I think what's weird is then you do the same thing, though. Then you create the same thing that you wanted it to be by depeopling, like an image that you share.
Mm-hmm.
And then it keeps going. It like cycles down the line.
When you remember
like
a vacation, you remember it as kind of like a vibe, as like a totality. You get a couple of images that are strung together into like a compressed little thing in your head, and that's the entire vacation is like that. And actually, we could at some other point talk about vacation as an idea because there's quite a bit there too. This idea that we need a vacation in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of and then like also like as an average worker, you are like TikTok becomes like the people's like opium, because it's like because and that is but it's that's wholeheartedly like what you're getting. Like it actually is you can eat spicy Doritos and watch as much content as you want. And that'll get you through life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's your vacation.
Like that actually will. It actually will like be a pretty dopamine like decent high of a roller coaster through life. Like it's like a not a roller coaster, but like a it's like it is a ride. It's like a ride through life. And sometimes you get the existential dread of being like, holy shit, what am I doing with my life? Where's all my time going? But it's not a horrible way to live. Like it's a bargain you can take, and it's a bargain that a lot of people take. Yeah. It's like relatively tempting. So like even like because you said that like labor is being outsourced and stuff, but like on the other hand, there are like everyone is completely shackled to labor in America.
Right, but but of a different kind, like or at least the
not
character
primarily
of it.
Productive necessarily.
Right, that it's all service based or like rent extraction based or like that everything is about I don't know like marketing in a very like people call like a semio-capitalism, like that it's more about like symbols and signs and language and stuff than it is about producing something. Well, I guess you're producing those, but not a material thing, Like the type of work of feeling maybe that like you're like wasting your time just doing something that's completely meaningless, like something that just feels like it's completely pointless, like. Why am I even like manning this station at this thing that nobody ever goes to, and like my job is superfluous? Like I don't need to be here. Like I think that's maybe more
right. That's a common symptom, of this kind of life that I'm talking about too. Yeah,
this is the David Graeber thing. This is bullshit jobs. This is the anthropological the anthropology of like the Western modern whatever workforce and people's experiences in it, but I know it's not everybody.
Interesting that the discussion about public parks, I think it's fitting that it's like that it's taken us to a place where we're talking about simulacra and media, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So if you will, but if you will entertain
Yeah.
me on one last kind of like pocket of this conversation, so I've been thinking a lot about like the spirits of places, um, in like all sorts of different folk magical traditions. Um, Place is very meaningful, and there are spirits that reside in places. Of all, the Valky of Finnish folklore from my own bloodline, the, fairies of English folklore, Asian spirits and indigenous spirits, Thai spirit. There's all sorts of different traditions have these. And I guess I wanted to ask you if you have going on hikes and stuff, because like for me when I go on these hikes, there is something annoying about having all the urban stuff, and sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I won't be able to like meet the Fae in these woods because it's too densely populated by machines and things.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it seems that like, although nature spirits, quote unquote, are still attracted to nature, like trees and stuff, I don't think that the urban architecture eradicates them from those spaces. And I think that is an interesting area to conjecture about things like hauntings and curses. Because, like, if you're a spirit of a place and all of a sudden there's a construction built up around it, then that might be very unpleasant for you. You might react quite negatively to the residents of the construction and such. So, I guess my main question though is like, do you have places that you like to go to meditate or to like hang out on your bike rides or whatever? And do you ever have those moments of like being like, of being like, oh man, this is like my spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm maybe I'll try and answer this. Like, something that I did realize that I noticed was like, for me, what feels really good and what I crave when I want to like go for a walk or a hike or a bike ride or something is purely like open visual space where I could see beyond like a certain like distance. And I think
Vista.
yeah, and I do think that does something for me, and I think that I don't know if it really for me ties into like a spirit thing, but yeah, I'm trying to think about like, because I think maybe when I was growing up in my childhood, I had like very special, specific places. A tree. It was actually pretty tree based for me when I was growing up, or like a spot by a stream. I think the stream stuff still holds true for me. Like
Yeah.
some, like water, lakes, streams, and yeah, but that could also be like something to do with this like open like visual like experience of seeing more, being able to lose the particularities and like see everything, and what that does for you. And maybe this is like the thing with hiking of like, getting to the to the vista point or whatever, like the struggle in order to then see everything. Yeah.
So, with the, Yeah, okay, so also when I'm hiking, sometimes I have, if I'm in a really beautiful hike, it's like really funny because sometimes I have these like tensions where I'm like, man, like there's so much to look at that like it's hard to know what to look at. Like,
Yeah.
and I keep going. You go back. You go back and forth between being like, I want to sit here and look at this beautiful flower, but then I'm not looking at the sunset. But if I'm looking at the sunset, I'm not looking at like this river. And if I'm doing any of those things, I'm not hiking. And I also want to keep walking.
Yeah, you
And
got to
then
be the
if you're
eye.
walking, where do your eyes go? Like,
Yeah, you're the disembodied
but
eye, the Emerson's eye.
but you are embodied is the problem because you
Right.
can't be seeing in all the directions at once.
Yeah.
So, but there's like as you go, like I think that you can be sensitive to moments where the moments that you are like, okay, I'm gonna stop for a second and like look at this plant. If you're like intuitively locked in, then I think that if you're going on a hike, then you take certain pauses to look at something, right?
I smell stuff. That's kind of my thing. I'm always crushing up a little bit of something, smelling something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think that I don't know, you can at least be open to that. And I feel like there will be like places where you want to like pause and just like check it out.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like
There's
if
energy.
you're open to it,
Yeah.
then you'll find them.
Yeah.
So that happens on hikes, and because it's so beautiful, you kind of have these amazing experiences of like vibing out kind of spiritually in these vistas or in these trees or the brooks, wherever your little spots are. Like you find like moments that you can vibe out. And so like, um so my conjecture would be that that is related to in some way to the presence of a spirit because there's sort of in the in kind of an animist vibe lately. But my question is really like if you take a photo of that and if you take a photo of it and share the photo, I think that does that moment of like transformation of the scene is interesting to me. And this is kind of this is another kind of like big topic, but I guess what I'm saying is that like that is something cool and you can transmit some kind of spirit or vibe that way, but this is kind of a concession that I don't think that does the full effect because I think these spirits might actually be local, like literally in a certain place. Do you follow what I'm saying at all?
Yeah.
Like the vibe
of course.
of a place is specific, even if you could represent it,
I feel like this goes
because it's a place based.
Yeah, it's like, and also maybe that the sharing or something, and I don't know, people, in a way, is like you could say it misses something because the spirit is not present in that form, like a picture or something, but also that like does it obliterate the spirit? Like, is it some sort of disrespect to the spirit? Like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of like questions you could ask about. I actually just thought of something that maybe it's related, but actually I'm not sure. But there was like this story that I had read once or something, like that this guy who was like some Western dude, he was maybe, I can't remember if he was from Europe or something, like was in like North Africa, and then he like had a camera and he like took a photo in this desert part of North Africa, and then there were like Bedouin people that were there. Like I don't know, I can't remember everything about it, but like he took this photo and like was like showing it to them of like, cool, right? Like pretty neat. And the one person like answered like all he said was like, why stop time? Or something. And it like I think that maybe what I'm trying to get at is like
That's like one of those profound little quotes that
yeah,
you're like, wait a second.
and like that like something about the stasis is like untrue, and like it's incongruent with the constant change and becoming of world and life, and maybe that's also like what the spirit is like. I feel like somebody who knows more about like Hegelian shit would have something to say about this, but I don't know anything about that. But like the spirit like moving time, in that it's like somehow disrespectful to like, but I don't know if this is like really animistic at all. Like it's not really like the spirit is like inhabiting one particular like thing or something. You know what I mean? It's not like it's in a tree or in a, like a spot on the ground or something. You know, I'm not sure.
I mean, I don't know if like necessarily there. I don't know if there has to be a distinction between like the Hegelian spirit and the idea of like local spirits. Actually, but
Yeah.
you know, I think they
No,
could be
that's
they
cool.
could be compatible, but they're not really. Hegel isn't necessarily talking about animism, but like,
Right.
and in some way he kind of is like the. I don't know. Well, who knows though? Hegel's,
I don't.
yeah,
I have no idea.
indecipherable.
Yeah.
So, but okay, so I get my like, I guess like kind of like my call to action in this for myself as well. Basically, my theory is that those spirits exist in every environment, including your apartment complex, the street you live on, urban world as well. And basically, my theory is that so even though you can't take a picture of the places that really speak to you and bring them with you in a way that will do anything more than nostalgia for you when you look at the photo, I do think that you can awaken a sort of wonder and therapeutic experience of being an invisible eyeball, transcendence of all these things in any environment, as long as you develop a relationship with what I would call the spirits there, but what you might call the energy there, or the aesthetics, or the care that you take to observe it with. I'm basically saying, like, I'm basically wondering, I'm theorizing here, what happens if we try to take the energy that we get on a hike, the reverence, and we start applying it to things that are not quote unquote nature,
Right.
but in
Right.
fact are. Because anywhere you are is actually where nature is. So yeah. Like
Yeah.
But there's also some really amazing if all you care about is life, then there are some really amazing critters in every environment. And I
Yeah.
actually find it really meaningful to also build a relationship with the insects that might be cohabitating a space with you. You know, some of them you don't want, but some of them might not be the worst thing. Or maybe you learn how to like clean up after yourself in a certain way that so that they're not as bothersome to you, right? But so that you don't have to like exterminate them. Or maybe you like find some weeds in your garden that you actually develop a relationship with and say like, oh, this weed is actually pretty beautiful in a certain way. And, like you look it up and like, oh, it has medicinal uses. Basically, I'm saying that like, what happens when we take we can be like critters of our wilderness that is our lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We can form symbioses in a emergent way that Mother Nature, you know, and I don't mean to invoke that sort of like maternalistic energy, but that natural spirit wants us to be, animates through us, you know, emanates through us. We can evoke that in any setting, you know? And I think that if we do, then we're spreading the wonder and the everything of hiking, of wilderness, the genuine part of it, into our own lives. So that's the part that I think we can. I think this is maybe a correction for my own thinking a little bit. on this podcast about this idea of the transferability of the natural through technology. So basically this idea that like you take a picture of it, like there might be a way to represent it where that you can transmit the energy of it from the place to the internet or whatever. It's a pivot away from that because I think maybe it's more about trying to just be with and experience and engage with the spirit energy of whatever you're in the midst of, which can include technology. Like, I think that there are also probably, if there's spirits of this and that, then there's also spirits of the technology as well, you know?
Yeah. This is giving me some more like modernist vibes now. I don't know, like I am the sun or something, you know, like that you can take on the energy or the spirit of something. Actually, I don't even know what I'm talking about, but you can take on that, and that's what you can like transmit. So it doesn't have to be an image or something, because also like I think when you're like, if we're talking about the transference, the process of sharing, I suppose it's like, you know, it's caught up in so much more than just like, here's this place, I hope you get the same vibes as I did, you know. There's also that it's like, I'm thinking about you as a person who has shared it, I'm thinking about myself as a person, and like, oh, you know, there's a lot of whatever, like, oh, I wish I were in Mykonos or wherever, like, so there's all these other elements that are not just like, oh yeah, I like the vibe of this place. And I feel like that's honestly more where we're at, like, in terms of like a social media, and maybe something that I'm, you know, honestly, I'm just gonna like bring up something that was big for me when I was younger. That was like a big like moment, a turning point in my life when I was like 16, 17. Was watching what's it even called? The book and the movie where the guy like Chris McCandless like goes Into the Wild, yeah. And he like burns his money and stuff and his social security card and like goes to Alaska, and you know, this like reconnecting with the with life and like, you know, this more authentic way of living, but then, you know, he dies alone in like an RV in the like Alaskan outback, and like but then there's this thing, you know, that he scribbled down was like, nope, like happiness not real unless shared. And like so I'm thinking about this sharing as something like, but maybe also it feels good for people to just like, you just go to your like special place that has the vibes and the energy for you, and you don't need to share it at all. Like, it's just, or maybe you're sharing it not with fellow Homo sapiens or something, you know, that you're sharing it with the insects and the plants and stuff. And I'm getting more into that as well. Like, that's definitely been something I've been on. And I feel like learning about animals, and just like trying to think about, like, to really think about animals as beings that have a life, that like go through a life like you do. And that's like a difficult practice that can be fun, and maybe is kind of getting at what you're also getting at, where you could transfer some like I don't know, like energy of a snake or a grasshopper or a fish or something that like lives a distinct life, like a particular life, and what we can like learn from that, not really, it doesn't have to be in like an extractive way, but just in like a recognition of like the fullness of this like social world, and that ecology can be social and is like I don't know, and it gets you away from that sort of like maybe like a social Darwinist suicidal, like, I don't know, like, thing where there's not enough for everyone, like, and there's only a limited amount of like resources, and it's a competition constantly for whatever, and it's like, dude, I'm just looking at caterpillars or something, and like, you know what I mean? Like, it can maybe displace some of that. And
well, yeah, I mean, and also for the record, I mean, like, from a biological perspective, Darwinism, this idea of like survival of the fittest has been sort of like this.
yeah, it was like,
I think it's always been just a theory, but like there have been some very important discoveries about the building blocks of life.
yeah,
It was actually more about like mutual consumption and the inability to consume two organisms trying to eat each other, but being able to fully actually eat each other, and then they form like a symbiosis.
yeah,
Because like one is only partially devoured, and
Yeah.
the other one is so.
or even that like a cell, or like what became the first like a I can't I'm gonna fuck this up, but I think it's like a eukaryote or something, like a cell with like a nucleus, that was actually like the intrusion of a bacteria of another like life form, or whatever. Like,
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's like a mutualism. Symbioses and stuff are also a big part of this whole how life exists as well. It's not just it's never just been like one organism versus another when it comes to evolution. But yeah, so
This has been a nice one. I'm feeling this is like just pleasant. This episode.
that's nice. Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
I'm trying to. I think that I have a. I don't know. I'm trying to like bring some like hope or like meaning into the way that I speak on this, because like I think that so far a lot of the tone that I've been processing and putting forth has been like pointing out how like messed up so many different things are. So I'm trying to like put forth some like hopeful, constructive, some constructive like aspects of my kind of philosophy as well. Being alone in nature is not really the goal, because wherever you are, there's actually like millions of critters around you. And at the same time, the same kind of like meditative recollections and emergent thought processes and creative outflowings, I believe can be spurred in any environment. I mean, if you find the way to navigate it correctly,
Yeah. Was this the thing, like the Ali Words episode of like suburban, like a suburban animism? Was that what it was? Maybe just a plug for that episode as well. Maybe I was just getting at like, if this is a thread that's interesting to people, like this, like bringing these vibes to like things that maybe you don't think of as natural, or like that the world around you is like fake and horrible or something, but you could bring this to like whatever, like instead of thinking about something that I get caught up in is like, oh, like air conditioner, refrigerator, like all these things that like just constantly are using energy, and for what? Like, what is this doing? Like, this is just like, this is like, I don't know, like a refrigerator is stopping time, like, or but instead maybe that it doesn't always have to be thought about in these like kind of bleak, depressing ways, and then that are also infused and caught up in the same sort of psy-op that you were talking about, of like...
Yeah, but I mean, like, at the same time, like, I think brands are also basically, like, gigantic egregores, so, like, it's not completely...
What is that?
That's a whole other can of worms. An egregore is, like, basically a created spirit, so, like, a spirit that's been created for a specific purpose. So... that's different than like a squirrel. You know what I'm
Okay,
saying?
gotcha.
Like if it has like a brand, is a whole nother can of worms again.
Mm,
Because brand I think also has spirit, but like I will say that yeah, the thing is like you don't have to be phobic about it because clearly we all work with brands in our lives, you know. But like so yeah, I guess it does apply. I mean, yeah, it's like so basically like I guess and um but initially what I was trying to say is that like the nature spirits of place also exist in wherever you are because like before your house was built there was the nature spirit, you know. And then so the spirit of place is what I'm talking about.
mm-hmm.
So you know, the fact that there's like traffic signs or like a sidewalk or sprinkler there would be also significant, but yeah, making relationships with the place is it's not like a unique call to action, but like this is pretty commonly a lot of people who believe in spirits will say this. Like again, it's like in every different tradition. I mean, a lot of different folk traditions have nature spirits of places. And I'm saying that hiking is a place where we allow ourselves to open up to those sorts of experiences, but we can bring it to, and yeah, I mean, yeah, like, I do recommend Ali Ward's Suburban Butofu. It's part of the long process of trying to integrate different magical languages that they're involved in. Um, but they also like talk a lot about and we talked about going on like walks as a meditative process because I think maybe movement is also
Mm-hmm.
part of this.
Yeah.
But just getting familiar with your immediate block, your immediate surroundings in a continual repetitive way is definitely like akin to what I'm talking about. But yeah.
Mm.
Um but it's also like, you know, I don't know. Um yeah, it's just the thing that I'm trying to get more more of in my own life is the relationship with the actual um like spirit of the place where I live actually
Mm-hmm.
and the place that I work, you know, wherever I spend my but mainly where I live, you know, because
Yeah.
that's where I have the most, you know, ability to do so.
Right. And if you don't, like, I do think that like is a huge problem for a lot of us of feeling like shit
Yeah.
is fake, feeling like things are not real.
Yes.
And so like this is imbuing like one, you're like taking note, you're noticing and like imbuing all of this with like I don't know, like something that is I don't know if it's meaning or but it's like something that is definitely like helpful and hopeful to I don't know, just have around you. And I think that this is what I was trying to say in another episode about like being grateful that the world is like embodied instead of like this fear of like floating, like melting, like I don't know, like that. But I guess this does have some like interesting relationship to like this staticness that we keep talking about. But Yeah, because it's interesting to
Right,
think about
right.
that a spirit stays, regardless of how
Yeah.
the place that it's in changes. And I'm thinking about the
So,
obvious examples of like you have a sacred site or something that gets destroyed for a parking lot or something, like for the most unsacred thing. But then like, well, what does it mean
yeah.
politically to re-imbue that with something? Like, is it like really offensive to do that? Like, or is it actually something that just like helps us continue living? Like, and maybe it's
Yes.
both, but.
Yeah, and so this is actually really interesting. I am kind of thinking now about this tension between like the nature spirit of the place and the animism of things, objects that are put there, the animism of constructed objects. Because I do think that's also a thing. So like, but because like I do believe that like spirits can be removed from a place or can not no longer exist there. Um, but I think for a lot of places, like probably still have residual spirit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
From because like we've been here for the blink of an eye. You know what I mean? And all of our constructions and stuff have. So like these negotiations would be important to build. This intimacy would be important to build
Yeah, the
in order
intimacy.
to.
Yeah, yeah.
That might be conditioning the things that we see in our neighborhoods. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess I also wanted to just say that, like, I think that also like spirit can be generated by certain, like, I think that national parks might actually have a certain type of,
Yeah.
national spirit that gets
Oh, okay.
implanted upon
Interesting.
them
I was
too.
thinking about like the geologic, like, like you go and you look at something like Devil's Tower or like Grand Canyon, and you think about
Mm-hmm.
like this generation over millennia, like of something that like I don't know is so like unique and weird and like funny and also just like kind of hard to wrap your head around like um yeah that like so much time has has existed and um I don't know. I was thinking about like the geologic, but like a national spirit. Like, okay, actually, to bring it back to the Margaret Grebowicz, this is what she talks about with Mount Rushmore. That like the national spirit is engraved
Right.
actually into the landscape, where you
Right. So
have
yeah.
the founding fathers that their faces. I've actually never been. I'm really interested to. I don't even know if I want to go actually, but it like I don't know, like there that meshing of those two. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Right. So I feel like these negotiations are important, and they don't have to just be in quote unquote nature, because nature is wherever you are.
Right, right, right.
And I guess the body's also. Yeah, it's
Oh,
been kind of
yeah.
fun to think about my body as like something that I'm like. What if I treated my body the same way that I treat my favorite spots in nature?
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
And then you're just
actually,
looking at it, and you're like, oh, this funny creature. Like when
yeah.
you see a squirrel or something.
I had some like poetic thought that I think relates to this. Like, well, it was like one of those things like you wake up maybe from like a dream or something, and then I like had a thought and I wrote it down. And I think that thinking like doing these sort of like exercises, these meditations are helpful for like yeah, like building the world or allowing the world that we want um, to like come to be. To like think about like I was thinking about like oh what if you had to like crawl like on the road or something or like crawl on like a sidewalk like what how would you want it to feel or something like that and like in this whatever state that I was in, I thought of like a buzz cut, like someone's like buzz cut hair, like the feeling of like rubbing against that,
Mm-hmm.
and like
It's funny. I was
and
just thinking about moss. So I think moss is
yeah,
kind of
moss,
similar
exactly, like
texture.
these very like and so then it's like okay, like maybe maybe concrete is useful in some ways, but like if you're trying to have a place that is for like different purposes other than speed and smoothness and efficiency and movement, like of that sort, that like maybe this is just like a duh thing, but it is an interesting like meditation of like what would you want something to actually like feel like on a bodily level, and how would that inform maybe like a more conscious design of things, that the design for something isn't always just designed purely for like capital interests all the time, that it's like they're I don't know, but maybe this is actually weird because maybe this is what conservation
choosing
is.
Your like it also means that you're hopefully, and again this is for me as well, but like hopefully this assignment kind of means also that we're doing that in our own most intimate places. Like, what's your favorite texture of blanket? Like, what kind of textures do you want around your house? Like, how can you invite yourself to like engage with your apartment wherever you live in the most like
nice,
evocative way possible?
Yeah, that's good.
Spirited way possible.
Nice.
And, yeah, I think that this is also like just a quick note, like a little update, like I think this framework is kind of helping me with the alcoholism a little bit, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just think that like it's helping me also. I've been able to like moderate a lot of addictions, not just alcohol, but also like nicotine, and also like I'm working on some other ones too.
Mm-hmm.
But this like because I'm looking for the spaciousness of a vista, but in my own head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like addiction is a way to I don't know, but I feel like the mindfulness is a big way to is a remedy for a lot of these things, and mindfulness only works if you want to be there, and I feel like that means that you have to just develop some kind of doing that, for me at least, that is like exciting enough and also comfortable enough. So that, I don't know, like it's got to have something mystical about it, because I'm not going to be wanting to be there if it doesn't have that. So it's like,
nice.
How can I enchant my immediate surroundings as much as possible instead of having to rely on other stuff to take me out of it,
Yeah. Nice.
Just a little update about that, because that's been kind of another like. We started the podcast. It's been a while since it's just been me and you, but like when we had our first discussions on this podcast, that was a big part of it. It's like trying to get out of these cycles, and I just wanted to share like it's been kind of working for me a little bit on that. So yeah,
nice, yeah. Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, like, I don't know, like keeping. Like for some reason, for a while, I was like stupidly cynical about like. I don't know, like having plants in your house and like
yeah, me too.
Also like pets, and I've been really just leaning into like the like having like dogs and cats and stuff is like amazing. Like and also it is like mystical. It's like mystical, magical, like I don't know. I've been. I guess that's kind of like maybe a similar thing for me then. Like I feel like those things are like leaning me away from this maybe like more boring cynicism, and like we're re-imbuing things in our lives. Yeah, okay, I'm going on, but I'm also trying to write some stuff down at the same time, but all right, what do you say? Should we call it?
Thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate it. It's great to have an episode with just me and Carson, just like the first ones. And yeah, got some fun stuff coming up here too. Yeah, thanks very much. We'll see you next week.
Sometimes it feels like something went wrong, and that's why we're here. That we're in some kind of cosmic cage or simulated psy-op. We become in the face of simulations and psy-ops, and from wrongness spring. In thought and in body, no one, not two. In sky and seed sown, we dream up shadows to love through and hold their calloused hands, shaping change in the nether pool from breath to breath, and coming up again and again, seeking vistas of freedom. Learn from the labyrinth amongst breathing mountains. How do you look, and where are you looking? Take note when you're stuck, and record before breaking. How's that feel to rot with glee?